welcome to the Daily Climate Show. Coming up today, we'll be live in Davos, where international leaders are grappling with how to tackle climate change and the global repercussions of the war in Ukraine. Anthony Albanese is sworn in as Australia's new Prime Minister, with action on climate change top of the agenda. And a senior safety consultant has resigned from the energy giant Shell, saying the company is causing extreme harm to the planet. Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, where we track the changes happening to the world, hear from the people affected by those changes, and try to get answers from those tasked with tackling the problem. Now, Alok Sharma, the president of the COP26 Climate Summit, has told Sky News that the crisis in Ukraine will accelerate the move away from dependence on fossil fuels. Now, climate is traditionally one of the big issues that leaders try to grapple with at the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Switzerland. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the world's focus is elsewhere. Yet the UN has warned again and again this year that we're not doing enough to avoid catastrophic climate change. Well, joining me now from Davos is our business correspondent, Paul Kelso. And Paul, I know you managed to grab a word with Alok Sharma earlier. He's determined, isn't he, that climate change isn't sidelined at this year's summit?
Yes, he is. He's actually probably the ranking British politician in Davos this week. There's no senior ministerial presence, no Chancellor of the Exchequer, no business secretary, and as far as we know, no Prime Minister. But Alok Sharma is here in his role as COP26 president. And you're right in what you say, in that perhaps the headline attention has shifted away from climate, certainly in the 6 months since Glasgow and COP26. Yet about a third of the panels, the talking shops that go on here in this rather rarefied conference environment are about climate. I suspect that the agenda was put together before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the consequences of that act of aggression are that the immediate attention of political leaders, business leaders, and indeed civil society that's here is to try and deal with the fallout from what's happening just a couple of thousand kilometres to the east. But speaking to Alok Sharma today, he's here trying to keep the renewable flame to people's feet, if you like, to try and keep up the pressure, to get people to deliver on the commitments they made in Glasgow. And he told me that he believes the war in Ukraine will in fact accelerate the shift to renewables.
It's completely understandable that as a result of Russia's brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine, you are seeing people focused on that particular challenge. That's completely understandable. Of course, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Ukraine. But I think what it has also done is highlighted the vulnerability of countries relying on fossil fuels, particularly when they're reliant on hostile actors, if I can put it like that. And I think what you've seen in response from countries around the world is a realization that the way you ensure energy security is to make sure that you have homegrown, clean energy. You're seeing that in the UK. We've set out our British energy security strategy, very clearly focused on renewables, nuclear, clean energy. You're seeing that coming through from other countries as well.
I've also spoken to the Egyptian foreign minister who's here because Egypt assumes the presidency of COP in November and will host COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh next year. He praised Mr. Sharma's work. He said they were ready to take on the baton from the UK and would continue the diplomatic work. It would be interesting to have an African country hosting COP. He insisted it wasn't an African COP, but here you have a continent that hasn't enjoyed the benefits of the carbon age, but is feeling the impact of climate change, perhaps more immediately than Europe. But clearly, from what has happened in Ukraine, despite all the optimism from Mr. Sharma and indeed the Egyptians, realpolitik, real events will always potentially get in the way of this long road and necessary road driving business and governments towards net zero.
Paul, thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look now at some of the day's other climate news. And Australia swore in a new Prime Minister today after what was dubbed the climate election. Labour leader Anthony Albanese campaigned on stronger climate ambitions than the outgoing PM Scott Morrison, pledging to cut emissions by 43% by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. An unprecedented number of independent candidates were elected, and they'll be pivotal in holding the new government to account on climate policy. In his victory speech this weekend, Albanese pledged to end the climate wars.
We can have an even better future if we seize the opportunities that are right there in front of us. The opportunity to shape change rather than be shaped by it. And we can shape change more effectively if we seek to unite people on that journey of change. Together, we can end the climate wars.
Back in the UK, the government has launched a multi-billion-pound scheme to help reduce carbon emissions from heating buildings. Homeowners can get grants of up to £5,000 to replace gas boilers with new low-carbon heat pumps. It's been met with criticism, however. Some experts say the fund is only enough to help around 90,000 homes across the country. A thick blanket of orange dust has caused disruption across Iraq. The sandstorm has led to extremely low visibility and air quality, effectively closing down the capital Baghdad and forcing many people to hospital with breathing difficulties. Iraq is prone to seasonal sandstorms, but experts have warned their growing frequency has been brought on by desertification, record low rainfall and climate change. Now, a safety consultant who spent more than a decade working as a contractor for Shell has publicly cut ties, claiming the oil and gas company is causing extreme harm to the planet. In an email to hundreds of Shell employees, including the chief executive, Caroline Dennett wrote that the company is planning to expand oil and gas exploration against the advice of United Nations climate scientists. And she ended her email, "It pains me to end this working relationship, which I have greatly valued, and I can no longer work for a company that ignores all the alarms and dismisses the risks of climate change and ecological collapse." Well, Shell sent this statement in response. They said, "Be in no doubt, we are determined to deliver on our global strategy to be a net zero company by 2050, and thousands of our people are working hard to achieve this. We have set targets for the short, medium and long term and have every intention of hitting them. We're already investing billions of dollars in low-carbon energy, although the world will still need oil and gas for decades to come in sectors that can't be easily decarbonised." Well, I spoke to Caroline Dennett earlier and asked her why she's cutting ties with Shell now.
Yeah, I think it's because I really truly believe that they're just ignoring the risks of climate change and ecological collapse. The alarm bells have been ringing, the United Nations, the International Energy Agency, all saying that we must immediately cease with any new oil and gas extractions and rapidly transition to renewables for a safe future and a habitable world. And I just don't see that Shell are doing that in any meaningful way. And that really contradicts their ambition for their safety ambitions, which is around do no harm. But they are causing harms on a massive scale because of their disregard for the climate risks and the ecological problems that the oil and gas industry is producing.
You say they're ignoring the alarms around climate change, but they would point out, wouldn't they, that they've got a net zero target. They aim to hit net zero by 2050. They say they've also got short, medium and long-term targets, all of which they intend to hit, and they're throwing billions into it.
Yeah, they do say that, but I find it hard to believe that if you are having that target, that you would still look for new oil and gas licenses to take even more out of the ground than what we have, and the science is absolutely clear. We have to leave it in the ground. We really cannot afford to increase global heating any more than it is going to be already. And if we continue to extract more, that's just going to put more CO2 into the atmosphere. So I just think there's a real contradiction in what they say publicly and what they're doing in reality.
Well, yes, one of your complaints has been, hasn't it, that you say that Shell isn't winding down its oil and gas, but they believe that their oil production has peaked. They say they think it's been going down since 2019.
Yeah, that may be the case for oil. I don't have their internal statistics on that, but there is certainly a race for more extraction projects and for more licenses. And I just would have thought, if you're serious about transitioning, that you would really stop that. You would create a new vision for your company and lead us into that future. Shell have been pioneers in the energy industry, and I just think it's a real shame that they're not using all of their their human and financial and technical capital to put us on the right path to a safe future. You know, it just seems a shame that they're really sticking their heels in on this.
Well, yes, I mean, they say they have plans to transition away from fossil fuels towards clean energy. But in the meantime, the world does still need some oil and gas because there are some sectors that can't be easily decarbonised. I mean, they've got a point there, haven't they?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone is saying we need to turn the tap off right at this moment. We would obviously see massive societal collapse if we did that. But I do think, you know, we need to see evidence of that rapid transition and on a scale that is going to save us. And I just think they are a company that has scale. They are capable of doing that. They just need to get on with it. But I don't think they are. You know, I think they're still talking as if we have decades and decades before we need to act. You know, their 2050 target means that they have to act now, not wait until it's 2045 or 2049.
Caroline Dennett, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, with me now is our climate correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter. So, Hannah, how significant is a resignation like this?
It's very unusual, I think, to hear from somebody so closely and so recently involved with a major oil and gas company. Of course, it's come at a time when the oil and gas industry is under intense scrutiny and facing severe criticism, not just for their ongoing role in climate change. You know, the UN has said that fossil fuel needs to stay in the ground. There can't be any new extraction, but also for enjoying record profits driven by the energy crisis and the war in Ukraine, which has prompted calls for a windfall tax, among other things. But the broader context remains that this government, the UK's government, believes that oil and gas in particular are going to be necessary in the coming decade. You simply cannot turn the taps off, and you can't turn the taps off even quickly. And that gas is a necessary transition fuel as we push towards a net zero future, and that critically gas can be extracted and those net zero targets remain intact. So there is a disagreement between people like Ms Dennett and campaigners who say that oil and gas companies are going to be responsible in large part for the world missing its global heating targets, and those who are right at the face of this, including the British government, trying to make policy around this, who say that the two things can be achieved, that we can continue to extract oil and gas to an extent, and we can still continue to eventually reduce our carbon emissions to zero by 2050.
Hannah, thanks very much indeed. And that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching.